Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Mitie's Plan Zero webinar for September. This webinar is around waste and imagining a world without waste. We've chosen this subject because this is Recycling Week, so it fits in very, very nicely with the agenda. As you can see on the screen, the agenda this morning is a quick welcome by me. My name is Nick Carter and I'm the Commercial Director for Mitie's Waste business. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about the circular economy and reimagining a world without waste. I'm then going to pass over to my colleague, Kevin Green, who's Director of Mitie's WasteMatch service, and he's going to talk about the re-establishing of the value of unwanted assets. Unfortunately, we were then going to hear from Peter Mather, representing Marsh McLennan, and he was going to talk about their sustainable return to the office. Unfortunately, Peter is ill this morning, so won't be joining us. So we will move straight on to Jon Wyss from Steelcase, who's going to talk about sustainable procurement. And then we will move on to questions and answers. Could I ask you please to use the questions and answers tab on Zoom rather than the chat, because it's really difficult for us to moderate stuff from the chat and it's also difficult for us to see. So if you do have anything, please can you use the questions and answers? Thank you. So as I said just now, I'm going to talk just for about 10 minutes on reimagining a world without waste. And I think I wanted to start by saying, you know, I'm certainly not an expert in this area. I have many, many years of experience in the waste management industry and 14 years experience of working with Mitie's waste business. And I think that the one thing I've learned around managing waste in a sustainable way is that it takes the ability to have some common sense, to step back and look at your own processes, and then to think about what you can do differently. And I think about what you can do differently is probably the theme that I'll be using through my slides. I think it's always interesting to think about where does waste arrive in your organization? How does it appear? And it often appears from procurement processes and packaging of incoming goods and supplies. It often appears from production, when production goes wrong, or production overruns, and it often comes from over-ordering of things. So if we think about things like food waste, very often there's food waste in an organization because things have been over-ordered. So if I could have the next slide, please. You will see here that what I use as my Bible, and some would say it's a little bit old-fashioned, is the green triangle on the right, and this is the waste hierarchy. I will say this is a slightly mitified waste hierarchy. It's slightly more wordy and slightly more complex than the one that's issued by DEFRA. But within Mitie, we find it useful to use for our own waste and for our clients' waste. And the idea, for those of you that don't know around the waste hierarchy, is that every waste that arises in an organization should be assessed using this waste hierarchy. And the worst options are towards the bottom, and the good options in terms of sustainable impacts are towards the top. So at the top, we have prevention, don't create the waste at all. Next down, we have reduction, so can you reduce the amount of waste that we create? Third from the top, reuse, so using elements of discarded items again for their original purpose. Then we have recycling, turning waste into new products. Below that, we have other recovery. So this is incineration with energy recovery. So things like waste to energy plants or RDF exports. And at the bottom, we have incineration without energy recovery and landfill. And this is the process that we tend to use within Mitie with our own waste and with our clients' waste. And we try and always think about how do we move ourselves up through that hierarchy. Many people in organizations these days have really, really strong targets around zero to landfill, and that's great. That's very, very admirable. The difficulty with zero to landfill is it's still only taking you from perhaps the bottom level of that waste hierarchy to the next level up. Many of us still say that when we recycle waste items, so we turn them into a new product, we're doing really, really well, and we are. I'm not here to diss anybody that thinks recycling is great, but we are only actually halfway up the waste hierarchy. So recycling is great, but I think the mindset that we all have to have these days is to think about the top three. So reuse, can something be reused? And I know Kevin and John will be talking about this later on in much more detail. Reduce, so can we actually look at ways of reducing the amount of waste created? So can we do better procurement? Can we do greener procurement? Can we stop production overruns and bad quality? And can we stop over ordering? And at the top, prevention. Prevention is difficult, but prevention is the panacea that we are all aiming for. So as I say, it's about taking that step back and thinking differently. Another very, very simple one here, and as I say, imagining a world without waste doesn't have to be difficult or complex. We work with Unilever across the UK portfolio of manufacturing plants, and many of their raw materials arrive in very, very high quality cardboard boxes. Some of them come from their plants across the globe, and some of them are imported from suppliers outside of the UK. So the quality of the cardboard boxes arriving at their sites are really, really good. And Unilever thought they were doing a great job, and they were, because they have balers at their manufacturing sites, and they were baling their cardboard and sending it off for recycling. That's a really great environmental thing. I think there were probably two issues with that. One is they were at the mercy of the markets for cardboard bales, which change across the world in a similar way to the stock market. So sometimes they got really, really good commercial value for their cardboard, and other times they got hardly anything. And I think the other issue with that is they are only at recycling on the waste hierarchy. So we spent a lot of time and effort working with Unilever to get their cardboard boxes into a reuse scenario. So we worked with a supply chain partner who takes away those high quality cardboard boxes, flat packs them and resells them into the moving industry. So those of you that move house will know it's actually really difficult to pick up cardboard boxes from supermarkets these days, like we used to. And there are companies out there, sometimes removal companies themselves, who will sell those to you. And they come from this supply chain partner. So you could indeed be moving house with an ex-Unilever cardboard box. Some of the challenges in doing this were around removing branding and removing barcodes, because Unilever are very, very protective of their brand, understandably. So although the concept here was very, very easy, the implementation was a little bit more challenging, but we managed to do it. And I thought that stat there was very interesting, that it takes roughly 17 trees to produce 1 ton of cardboard boxes. So for every 1 ton of cardboard boxes we reuse, we've saved 17 trees, which is a great story. Thanks, Lucy. So this example is a little bit more of a technical one. So the first two examples I've given you are quite simple. We work with a large pharmaceutical client in the northeast of the country. They have an effluent treatment plant on site, and one of the outputs, so one of their own wastes they produce, is effluent treatment sludge. For many, many years, this had been sent to a facility like the one on the left-hand side of the screen, which is a high-temperature incinerator. And the issue with high-temperature incineration is there is no energy recovery. So although the disposal route was very compliant and very secure, it actually gave our customer what is termed a D code, a disposal code. So they can't claim any environmental benefit for sending their waste there. We spent quite a lot of time re-engineering the solution for our client, and it meant changing some of the processes on site that they used in the production of the sludge. One of these was actually that they used to dry the sludge using a huge dryer, and we actually got them to stop drying the sludge, which was great for them as well, because it saved them an awful lot in energy costs, and they could claim the carbon benefit for not using the dryer. And the sludge was used in a more wet, produced in a more wet way, and we moved it in a completely different container, and we identified a route into a waste to energy plant. So they are now still incinerating their effluent treatment sludge, moving it in a different way. They are not running their dryer, so they had a cost saving there, and they now get what we call an R code. So they get a recycling and a recovery code by jumping in and changing route there. And I've told a very simple story there, and as you can imagine, when you're dealing with a pharmaceutical client and they have to change a process on site, there are quite a lot of hoops and challenges to jump through. Took us about a year to get there, and we started with a small trial, but it's been running for a couple of years now, and a really, really nice story. Thanks, Lucy. And finally, I've chosen just to briefly talk about CocaCola, who aren't one of Mitie's clients. I think it's, once again, just taking a step back and thinking about a world without waste. And this is from the CocaCola website. And obviously, traditionally, they've had quite a bad reputation in terms of sustainability and single-use plastics, because the majority of their drinks are sold in bottles. But it would appear here that they've actually grasped the bull by the horns and decided to do something different. And they're actually making some really, really good commitments about the content of the bottles that they're using. And they're also making some commitments around the fact that they are going to recycle a bottle or can for every one that they sell by 2030. So I think they're doing a really, really good PR exercise there. I hope it's not greenwashing. I hope it's really, really true that they're going to do this. But I think what they've done is turned imagining a world without waste from something that was probably an issue to them in terms of corporate PR into something that I think is a really positive statement. That's the end of what I'm going to talk about for now. I would just say, to recap, I think the important things when you are looking at waste is really to take a step back, have a good dollop of common sense in looking at where your waste comes from in your organisation. Try to think differently and use that waste hierarchy as a guide. And you won't go far wrong. So that's my talk on imagining a world without waste. And I'm now going to pass over to Kevin Green, who's going to talk about Mitie's WasteMatch service.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm Kevin Green. I'm the director of WasteMatch, a company that I founded 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been 10 years since I started this. And at WasteMatch, what we believe is that the best way to tackle the climate emergency is just to keep assets in use for as long as possible. I'm being told my video is off. Might be back on now. So yeah, our belief is that the best way to tackle a climate emergency is to keep the assets in use for as long as possible. And as Nick highlighted, there's a lot of obstacles to that. And what we're trying to do is make it convenient for people to reuse and, worst case, recycle the assets that they've got. I mean, if you think about it from a domestic point of view, 20, 30 years ago, there were people recycling, but not to the scale that we do now. And we do it now because the council's made it convenient for us to do. We've got different coloured bins. We're incentivised and we're penalised if we don't recycle. So what WasteMatch is trying to do is break down some of those obstacles that we've got to reusing assets. Now, some of those, the ones you can see on the screen, are very practical obstacles to recycling. Before we get to that, there is operational obstacles. So you'd be amazed at how many times I hear within an organisation that we don't know if we can sell that asset on behalf of the organisation, or we don't know if we can even donate it to charity. Nick alluded to it earlier, where branding's, companies are very protective over branding, companies are very protected over assets, And sometimes the easiest option for them is just to send it for recycling and treat it as waste, because they don't have internal processes. So some of that operational obstacles that we've got to break down is things like empowering people to make sure assets are reused, incentivize them, and then being able to measure how much those assets are getting reused as well. The most fundamental obstacle that I've came across in the 10 years of trying to get these assets out and get them reused is timing. So if we get that one right, everything else is space, and money is a question of resourcefulness, not resources. Time is the fundamental one. If you tell me on a Wednesday that you need your building cleared on a Friday, then the outcomes of that are greatly reduced compared to if you make it an integral part of the project. So, you know, in the 10 years that I've been running this, you know, joining Mitie Waste and you know and delivering this through Mitie Waste has been a real eye opener, just from the amount of waste streams that we go through, the different types of assets that people throw away, but also the quality of assets that people throw away. And I'm guessing that you've all experienced this in the past. You've seen something that you know the company's chucking. You maybe see it in the basement, or you maybe see it sitting next to a skip, and you think, why are we throwing that away? You know, domestically, if you had an asset that you think is too good to bin, you're going to give it to friends, family, friends of friends, donate it to charity, you know, and then ultimately you'll take it to a recycling centre. And in business, it should be the exact same process. And what WasteMatch tries to do is make that dead simple for people. We try and break down these obstacles. So we engage clients at an early stage in terms of projects. What you find is everybody gets so focused. If you take it as a building move or a new project, everybody's so focused in getting into that shiny new building with the shiny new furniture and making sure everybody beds in, that they tend to forget the stuff that they've left behind. And when you think about the stuff they've left behind, it was an integral part of their business. You know, you needed that furniture and those assets for people to deliver what they're delivering for their customers. But the minute you've got that new, suddenly it becomes an inconvenience. So again, what we're trying to do is break down some of these obstacles and just push back on the idea that you always have to buy new. You know, so a very easy example within the furniture industry is the amount of people that throw away furniture because it's too big. You know, so the desk's the wrong size. It's, you know, it's no longer fit for purpose. We need a smaller footprint. Ironically, with the pandemic, everybody's going to people are going to a larger footprint. But you know, if we can't turn a big desk into a small desk, we're really doing something wrong. I mean, we used to manufacture things in this country. If we can't turn metal and wood into smaller metal and wood, you know, it's simple solutions. Nick touched on some very complicated processes in order to overcome some of these problems. WasteMatch looks at things that were an asset yesterday and how do we keep those as an asset today. It's more about an asset as a commodity rather than, you know, bales of cardboard. These are practical things that people would use every day and then just reimagine them. Think whether it's through refurbishment or whether it's straightforward reuse. So again, timing is the most important one in this. If we can encourage businesses to think about their waste as part of that process of their refurbishment or the renewal of their assets, and it becomes a fundamental part of that, then space and money are just, you know, that's just the process. That's just how we, you know, there's always a way to overcome those two issues. But again, you would be amazed at the quality of things that people pay to throw away. So Lucy, if you just jump onto the next slide. So again, WasteMatch started out looking at the furniture industry. You know, there's huge amounts of assets that businesses throw away. We've consolidated one financial institution from 1 million square feet they went from 1 million square feet into 1 million square feet. So they moved from 4 buildings into 1. And you're talking there about 49,000 items of furniture that were no longer required. So looking at those and thinking, right, okay, how do we get those reused? That's not a process that you can do in a week. You know, but there's charities out there that are spending core funding on buying furniture when other people are paying to throw furniture away. It's never made sense to me. I don't think it makes sense to many people. And what we're trying to do is be that matchmaker. I used to say that I used to run a dating agency, and then people get dead excited. But it turns out it's a dating agency for waste. But what I do is I matchmake between the businesses that have got a cost and a liability and an inconvenience of all these assets sitting there that they need to somehow get out their building, sometimes to get out of lease breaks that they're going to be penalised on. And how do we get those assets? How do we keep them in use within the business? So other sites within that business. You know, sometimes the left hand doesn't see what the right hand's doing, and just opening up that visibility within the company, sometimes you can get it reused within the same organisation. If it does become a genuine surplus asset, then how do we recover value? So if you look at some of these assets still have financial value. So we can either, on behalf of the company, we can either sell these assets on and offset those costs against the cost of removing them from the building and transporting them away, or we can recover social value. So again, any charity would be happy to receive any of these. And in my time doing this, you come across the weird and wonderful. So I did have one site where one of my guys went and done an audit, and he came back to me and said, I've got a Lamborghini. It's part of your scope. It's in the basement. It's a lovely machine, lovely cream Lamborghini with a soft top. And I thought I'd found my new company car. But again, in the reuse side of things, even with something as simple as reusing assets, you do have to put some thought into it, because my Lamborghini ended up being a tractor. So if I'd have done my due diligence, I would have realised that Lamborghini was a tractor company before they were a sports car company. But again, it was a lovely machine. But yeah, I don't go to work in the tractor. Again, just understanding that, you know, reuse is pretty straightforward. I mean, it was a chair yesterday. It's going to be a chair tomorrow. What I would say is that there is some issues that that when you go for the reuse option, sometimes there is issues with it. Lucy, if you jump on the next slide, at the start of the pandemic, and there's a lot to read on that, but I'll let you read that as I speak over it. But at the start of the pandemic, a lot of companies done the right thing by supporting their colleagues. You know, a lot of people were working from home, sitting at kitchen chairs, you know, working from sofas. And as part of that rollout for home working, what happened was right at the start, a lot of people took chairs from the office and brought those home. So this is one of the examples of where reuse, you do have to put a wee bit of thought into it. And I think every client that I've spoken to has fell foul of this. So it's worth taking, if nothing you take away from this, if this is the only thing you take away from it, pay attention to this slide and then go back and ask your FM, what did we do on this? Because the domestic fire regulations are more stringent than the office fire regulations. And when you think about it, there's a different risk assessment in the office. You've got a sprinkler system. You know, you tend not to come to the office with alcohol or naked flames or have kids running about or have hair straighteners or whatever other pieces of equipment you might have lying around. So this is a mistake. Well, I would say this is a mistake because there's a liability there for the business in taking these chairs from the office environment and take them into the domestic marketplace. As you can see from that, the Office for Product Safety and Trading Standards are very clear on this, that if the chair doesn't meet domestic fire regulations, you should not be using that in the home. Now, that being said, the risk on this is minimum. the chair doesn't spontaneously combust the minute you take it over the threshold of the office. So, you know, it's not looking to panic anybody on this, but having had this brought to my attention, this is something that you should look at when, because what's happening now is a lot of people are trying to get back into the office, and they're finding, well, the office is now devoid of chairs because you've sent them all home, and everybody's busy out buying new chairs to refill the office. And what I would suggest is that you buy a domestic chair, you repatriate those chairs back from the home back into the office, and send the new chairs with domestic fabric on it. And it is the fabric. So if you're wondering what it is that makes this not compliant, it's typically the fabric. So Chimera is a big supplier of fabrics within the furniture industry. Jon will vouch for that later on. But understanding the model and make a chair that you've got will understand whether you've got an issue here. And again, some clients are just like, well, I've sent 100 chairs home, it's not an issue for us. My fear is that at some point in the future, there's going to be a fire. It's going to be brought back to this issue. And if that makes front page headlines, then suddenly every FM manager in the country is going to be asked, what did we do and what's our exposure? So while we're still close to, you know, when that action happened, it's worth taking that back and looking as a company as to whether you've got exposure on this and whether it's something that you want to look at. As I say, the solution to this could be quite as simple as everybody's currently buying chairs. We can, you know, you go and buy a domestic chair and then repatriate those chairs to the office. As I say, this is an issue that sits at the back of my mind and keeps me awake at night, because I know this. A lot of FM managers don't know it. A lot of building managers don't know it. A lot of people that have been involved in putting these chairs out there don't know it. And a lot of the people that are sitting on these chairs don't know that they've been given a chair that doesn't meet fire regulations. And again, I think that's wrong. If you jump, sorry, Lucy, if you jump on to the next slide. There's a lot of reading in this, and I wouldn't advise you to sit and go through this, but this is a fundamental of the process that we follow in WasteMatch to try and use or try and reuse those assets. So we have a reuse portal. It's a shopping cart, if you like. You can create your own internal reuse operation. So as a business with a multi-sites, you can show what you've got on one site to all the other sites without anybody seeing it. Once you've done that, then you've maximised that internal reuse. And a lot of people do that at the minute using spreadsheets, and you send spreadsheets of audits out to people, and you do it off the back of that. Once you've exhausted that, then we help with a reuse network. So we've obviously got a massive base of clients and charities that could reuse those. So whether you recover the value in that by giving it away to charity and getting some corporate social responsibility kudos, or whether you sell that and offset some of the costs that you've got, then we can do that. And then ultimately it ends up as recycled. So again, if you think of the process of what you would do in a domestic situation, if you've got an old laptop that you surplus to requirements, you would look at family members and friends and say, okay, can I use this within my immediate circle? And then if you can, it's like, well, okay, do you know anybody that could use this? And that could be charities, it could be friends of friends, it could be anybody. And then ultimately you might think, well, I'll stick it on eBay and I'll try and get some money back on it because it costs me a lot of money. And ultimately you'll take it to the local recycling centre and you'll say, okay, I've got a laptop, and you put it away for ethical disposal. WasteMatch, it doesn't reinvent that. What it does is it tries to make the first part of that process more convenient for people. So we work with the clients hand in hand. We do audits. It's a free audit. So if you've got a building you need to empty, we can come look at those assets, do a free audit, assess what we think is the best outcome for that, whether it's pushing back on you and trying to get you to reuse it. We can remanufacture those assets to give them, to give you the asset that you want from the assets that you've already got. We can sell those assets on your behalf, get you some money back, you can donate them. But we give you a full report off the back of that free audit that says this is what we would recommend. And then hopefully off the back of that, I mean, again, we're a business, we have to survive. We want the contract to clear your building and to put those reuse, bring everything up to the top of that waste hierarchy that Nick was showing you. If we can drive more stuff to the top of that, keep the assets in use for longer, then that's basically the model we've got. And if you think about it, every time that you reuse an asset, whether you're selling it, whether you're donating it, there's a cost that you take out of the process. So it will always be cheaper to do the right thing with the asset than to do the wrong thing. So at the minute, there's people clearing buildings. You've got the cost of removing it from the building. You've got the cost of transporting it away from the building. And you've got the cost of disposal. You've got the cost of recycling it. Now, if all you do is give it away to charity, one of those three elements of cost being reduced, you don't pay for the disposal. If you manage to sell it on, then you've got money back in the pot. If you get somebody that wants the asset is willing to pay for the removal and the transport, then you've got a cost neutral solution. And if you've got really good assets, as you've seen from the examples I was given, the one with the tractor, they had a £50,000 liability on clearing their buildings, and we managed to clear that cost neutral. We managed to donate £5,000 to charity on their behalf, and we managed to do an employee resale scheme where employees could pick up, a desk and a monitor or a chair and a monitor to support their homeworking. So again, doing the right thing will always save you money, and that's how we're incentivized. So the WasteMatch model is usually, we give you a quote, this is what it would be if you'd done what you normally do, and then anything that we save you over and above that, we do a gain share with you, and that incentivizes us to do the right thing as well. So Lewis, if you could just jump on the next slide. So this gives you an example of some of the savings that we've made since WasteMatch has been part of Mitie. And I think one of the interesting ones, the 21,000 tonnes of CO2 that we've saved, that's equivalent to charging your mobile phone 2.6 billion times. So just try to put some of these numbers into perspective. 12,000 tonnes, it's over 1,000 London buses that we've managed to save. I think the biggest one there that jumps out is £1.9 million worth of strip out costs. So we're paying companies to take furniture out of a building, transport it away and recycle it. If you undo all that and you keep the asset in use, not only are you helping tackle the climate emergency by not throwing stuff away, you're also not having to buy the new thing. So you don't have to source the new wood, you don't have to source the new metal, you don't have to use the energy to manufacture. So, the saving over the strip out is, you then multiply that by the saving of not having to buy that asset in the first place. So again, I would commend the WasteMatch model to anybody, and it's not, WasteMatch isn't something that I sell to people. It's a process and a procedure that I want to get people involved in. It's how do we create that reuse network within your organisation, and how do we help you support that? And that's usually a free of charge service, because we want you to reuse more, recycle less, and we want to get involved in that process of helping you do that. And then how do we widen your reuse networks? How do we engage you with other people within your sector? So you might be in the banking sector, and there's other companies buying the same style of furniture, the same quality of furniture from the same manufacturer, and their surplus assets might be the missing piece of your jigsaw. And then ultimately, how do we get that out to the wider communities in which you work? How do we support the charities? So again, it's a process. It's not, I've not got a product to sell you here. This isn't a hard sell for you. It's just a conversation about what are you currently doing, how do we help you achieve something better for the examples that Nick gave. So again, any questions, pop them in the chat and we can answer them at the end. Thanks, Lucy. I think that's... And I'll just hand over to Jon, who will talk about how you marry the old with the new.
Thanks, Kevin. Just as a quick introduction, if I may, I'm Jon Wyss. I'm a project director for Insightful Environments. If you go to the next slide, if you would, Lucy, if that's all right. I'm a project director for Insightful Environments, i.e. one of the largest furniture integrators in the UK. We are wholly owned by a company called Steelcase, and they're a global furniture manufacturer. And we are Steelcase's largest dealer in the UK, but we have agreements in place with approximately 300 other supplier partners. Next slide, please, Lucy. So just in terms of post-COVID, how is our market changing, and particularly in reference to the furniture market? Certainly we've been working with clients who pre-COVID were already adopted sustainability standards such as WELL or SCAR, but we've certainly noticed a profound change in our clients, and clients are adopting new sustainability targets, new environmental goals, and our clients are certainly evaluating their current environmental standards, particularly as companies looking to achieve a carbon neutral status as soon as they can. And coincidentally, you might have noticed a huge increase, and certainly we have, in the increase in the number of sustainability positions and jobs being advertised, particularly on LinkedIn over the last 12 months. And also post-COVID, there's a very much a new focus on well-being, which links to the increase in hybrid working that many of us are now experiencing. I think the overall result is that clients and suppliers are taking on an ESG mindset these days, and this is a way of thinking about business that emphasizes the environmental, social, and governance impact of everything we do. And IE are no different. We've already started our journey by employing an external ESG consultant who's looking at our own environmental impact and creating strategies to help us to reduce this impact. Next slide, please, Lucy. So there's a whole plethora of different sustainability accreditations available. To some people and organizations, these can be very confusing. There are 4 main accreditations that clients strive for. These are BREEAM, LEED, SCAR rating, and WELL. Just a very quick overview, because it's obviously very early in the morning. BREEAM was established in 1990. This is a mainly European refurbishment and fit out standard. And there are sort of 10 elements that are assessed for BREEAM. Then you have LEED, which is established 8 years later, 98. This is the US version of BREEAM, and LEED offers 4 levels of certification from silver right through to platinum. You have SCAR, which is came in 2005. SCAR covers about 100 individual measures of good practice and 8 sustainability issues. It's the only SCAR rating is the only accreditation that really offers a specific furniture credit. And the newcomer, the new standard on the block is WELL, which was established in 2014. This is a building standard. This is the world's first building standard to focus on enhancing people's health and well-being through the built environment. Next slide, please. So how does furniture contribute to these environmental standards? Well, furniture plays a key part in achieving these standards from any of these institutes. It's central to getting the right tick in the box and accruing points, primarily in the materials category, so emitting emissions including VOCs or recycled content. Next slide, please. So I've just broken down our process, IE's process for sustainable procurement on this slide. So very simply, we look at the existing furniture assets with our clients. We review what can be reused. We review proposed manufacturers and match these against the selected target environmental goals. We then provide certificates and documentation, and we select, wherever possible, durable products with extended warranties. And then in terms of reuse of products, this has really been part of IE's DNA for many years. But interestingly, pre-COVID, this reuse of furniture was seen more as a cost reduction, but certainly increasingly so post-COVID. There's more of an emphasis on the environmental merits of reusing furniture. And again, sort of, before the pandemic, many of our clients, the first option would be to procure new furniture over reused assets, where the cost of reusing furniture was more expensive. But this is being challenged more and more as time goes on. There's certainly an emphasis on measuring embodied carbon within products. So product passports, namely EPDs, are essential so that we can do that. Products with long warranties and long product continuity agreements are also very key. And our parent company Steelcase offers many products with lifetime warranties. And there's many examples of task chairs like the Leap chair from Steelcase. Kevin, you know that well. A great example of this, where many blue chip clients are still using these chairs, even though they might be 20 years plus in terms of being in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So here's just an example page from a catalogue which we created for one of our global clients, where the furniture has helped to achieve WELL Platinum accreditation. There's a huge amount of work behind creating these pages and a catalogue for such a client, sifting through many different manufacturers to make sure the products do meet the Platinum accreditation. But a point I wish to make at this point is that currently there's no one product environmental passport. There's no one format. There's an overlap of different standards. There's standards published by manufacturers, which are very difficult to compare, and we're constantly reaching out to suppliers for that missing information. So in this complex world of environmental standards and sustainability targets, our role for clients is to vet and filter products against these standards and create product standards and due diligence. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple of examples of what we've achieved. We've helped one of our financial clients achieve WELL Platinum for a 300,000 square foot building, and we've helped a UK-based customer transforming 6 buildings across the country, working closely with Mitie, achieving SCAR Silver accreditation and extending life to many products by supplying spare parts and componentry. It's been quite an achievement. Next, please, Lucy. And just to help portray the acceleration of the reuse in office projects now, I thought this render for a proposed project helps to demonstrate this. This slide shows an early design proposal showing the new design principles post-COVID for one of our clients, a client that's got, or did have, about 94 buildings across the UK. Next, please. So the client wanted to reuse as much of the existing furniture asset as possible, as well as supplying new furniture. And you can see the large amount of proposed reuse items in orange. And this is pretty well how it's been rolling out across the program as we currently roll out the new design principles for this client. So it's quite a considerable amount of reuse going on. Long warranties and long product continuity agreements, as well as quality reupholstering, re-engineering products. This is the key to enable this reuse to take place. Some other examples, I know, referring to the subject of home workers brought up by Kevin, we've been supporting a client with their working from home program, a client with 15,000 home workers across the UK and Ireland. So we've supplied circa 5,000 recycled chairs, 3,000 recycled desks over the last 12 months, which has helped the client save money, but more importantly, maintain products within the circular economy, preventing products going to landfill. And just a small anecdote, recently we had Netflix come into our studio. Interesting, their project brief demanded all their furniture would come from 100% reused products. So we can certainly see the trend here. Next slide, please. So I think the good news is that with clients adopting new environmental standards, this means that there's more choice and more suppliers who've had to invest heavily into meeting their own accreditations in order that they'll be included in project tenders. So one of these suppliers, as you can see here, is a company called Frovey, a UK company, who've demonstrated this investment by designing all its furniture to contribute towards the WELL building standard. And I would say, personally, over the last 4 or 5 years, the choice of furniture manufacturers and suppliers whose products can contribute towards the 4 main building and fit out standards, I estimate these suppliers have probably tripled over that time. Next, please, Lucy. So I'd just like to introduce Steelcase and talk about their commitment to reduce climate change and their reducing their impact on the environment. Steelcase as a company, over 100 years old now, have already achieved carbon neutrality and have additionally set third-party science-based targets to reduce their carbon emissions and go beyond net zero by 2030. Steelcase, having surpassed previous greenhouse gas emission goals in 2020, Steelcase have announced its commitment to reduce absolute emissions by 50% by 2030. So in order to maintain this carbon neutrality, Steelcase have focused on their scope 1 and scope 2. This is direct, indirect emissions that result from their own or controlled activities. Steelcase will continue purchasing renewable energy, and that's 100% of their own global electricity consumption. It invests in carbon offset projects like reforestation to maintain this carbon neutrality for its direct operations. But these offsets are reducing as their emissions reduce over time, particularly as they invest in renewable energy technology such as solar panels and renewable energy directly sourced at its manufacturing plants globally. But Steelcase is also motivating suppliers. It's got many suppliers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So for scope 3, where emissions come from supporting activities outside their direct control, Steelcase are partnering with 80% of their suppliers to set their own science-based targets by 2025. And this is really critical in achieving not only their own respective targets, but enabling others to do the same. If the suppliers cannot meet these targets, then they could be at risk of losing some major supply contracts with Steelcase. Next slide, please. Just some impressive environmental credentials. Steelcase created the Think Chair, and it won the Cradle to Cradle Gold Award in 2009. This is one of the first furniture companies to be able to achieve this standard. It's a product certified with environmental quality and low emissions, and really designed for the circular economy. They have over 75 plus life cycle assessments and environmental product declarations, more than any other furniture manufacturer and any other manufacturer for that matter. It has 350 product environmental profiles. It was the first LEED certified manufacturing facility in the world, and all its manufacturing plants throughout the world are FFC or PFC certified. This is a chain of custody for all its wood products. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Steelcase has created its own eco-services back in 2008. So that's partnering with large organisations and repurposing furniture and retaining products in the circular economy. And globally, Steelcase are committed to help interested customers connect to a network of end-of-use service providers to repurpose decommissioned products, very much on the theme that Kevin was talking about. And the creation of their eco-services was influenced very much by strict anti-waste laws adopted in some countries, and France being a prime example of this. Next slide, please. So every year, 12 million tonnes of plastic are dumped into our oceans. Steelcase, via Steelcase is one of its own brands is helping to harvest plastics from the ocean and turn them into fabrics. The plastic waste is cleaned and transformed into upcycled marine waste, which is then given a second life by being woven into a fabric, and this is called Sequel. Just gives another example of what they're investing in. And then final slide, please. So what does the future hold for the furniture industry? What's next? So I think the key surely is maintaining products in the circular economy and moving away from the wasteful linear economy. So for example, in the US, demand for affordable, high quality furniture results in some 15 million tons of discarded furniture ending up in landfill every year. 10 million tons of furniture discarded by businesses and consumers in the EU member states each year. So I think there's a real demand and a need to increase helping our clients engage in the circular economy and provide that access and as Kevin said, that network of end-use service providers to prevent this. There needs to be a committed approach by all manufacturers to improve product sustainability, transparency, and particularly the material selection and to the end of use, promoting circularity and reducing waste, less parts to break down, and separation of all different materials. So Steelcase themselves are all plastics over 50 grams have to be labeled with their material composition. There is a need, as mentioned by both Nick and Kevin, there's a need to offer zero to landfill guarantees and the chain of custody documentation to back this guarantee up. Strong extended product lifetime warranties in our industry and designs and products that are built to last are essential. And manufacturers are now starting to set up taking back furniture which they originally manufactured. It was only last week I was talking to a major soft seating company in London, and they're doing this right now. However, they're not marketing this service because they fear of reducing their own new furniture sales. And more companies are offering the service, but not in an official capacity. But this will change. And I think the influence of the ever-present wealth building standard is having huge impact on projects where social value and local community impacts offer a considerable score on tendering for projects. This is likely to increase. Carbon neutral products will be marketed shortly. However, I think this is just marketing with individual offsets for each product. And again, as alluded to by Nick, there are many initiatives reducing packaging and removal of plastics from packaging, as Nick mentioned. And there's certainly a demand for locally sourced products, and the location of manufacture is gaining more emphasis. Some products can achieve high environmental credentials, but are manufactured and transported from the other side of the planet. So I think, just to summarize, the pressure is building on suppliers and manufacturers to take back furniture, to re-engineer the products and deliver them back into the marketplace. The market for this repurposed furniture is gaining momentum, and manufacturers need to embrace this challenge, or they will be left behind as business models change to support the circular economy. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. That was really, really interesting. Just a couple of questions that have popped through on the question and answer box. The first one is about where you can find a recording of this webinar. For those of you that have joined today, that will get emailed out to you by the Mitie Comms team. Second question, we've had one for you, Kevin, if you're still online, please, mate. We've had a question, are there any limits in what can reasonably and legally be reused via the WasteMatch system?
No, I mean, obviously, just staying within, look, as long as it was an asset yesterday and it's an asset tomorrow, we will pat test electrical items, we clean items, we ensure that the items are fit for purpose if we are donating them or selling them. Again, it's each individual circumstance would be governed by whatever legislation covers that, but I've not came across anything that I've struggled to find a suitable reuse for. other than, again, it comes back to timing. If you can give me some heads up, the worst case scenario is somebody tells you on a Wednesday that you have to clear a building on a Friday. You know, the outcomes for that are not great. But I had an organisation tell me that they had an incubator that they wanted to get rid of. It was a research organisation, and we managed to link them up with Edinburgh Zoo, and that incubator came back into use and is still currently in use as far as I know. So there isn't really, the limitation is on timing, you know. And again, if you've not got the space to store it, if there's, you know, if the transport cost of the item is going to be too great to offset, you know, somebody could have bought it cheaper. And it's this mindset of, you know, what's the most convenient thing for somebody to do, and that's typically the biggest stumbling block, is people value convenience still over sustainability.
Lovely, thanks, Kevin. And a question for Jon, if I can, please. Jon, how do you think the agile working agenda will affect the use of office buildings? For example, do you think there'll be more collaboration and meeting areas and less desk space?
We're seeing that already, Nick. It's you know, one client alone, which is one of our mutual clients. They've already launched 20 pilots across the UK, across their, you know, their 90 odd buildings. It's with the new hybrid model. Certainly, it's certainly challenging what I would call the old desk farms that you'd see in offices. That will never stay the same. It's all about collaboration, as you say. It's about going from fixed to fluid. It's more about the individual being supported in sort of focused areas, and that sort of braiding the physical and the digital as they go into the office. So they'll be trying to encompass people who are dialing in as much as being in the office. It's very much going to be very different, and that's proving to be the case. So, and that's what's keeping us very busy at the moment, as it is all of us.
Thanks, Jon. And there's one more question that I'm going to take, because it's a little bit more of a generalist question around, to get the desired outcomes, what are the behavioural changes that we're going to need to get from people to help us move forward with this agenda? And I think there are several behavioural changes. We need to get people, first of all, we need to get people thinking differently about the way they buy things into their organisations, and how sustainable those items are, how sustainable the packaging and the transport methods are to get them there. Once those things are within an organisation, as I say, it's about making sure the quality of use is good, so that if they're involved in a production scenario, for example, or a healthcare scenario, that, you know, things aren't wasted because processes aren't correct. I think we have to think always about, when there is waste, people thinking about really, really simple stuff like putting that in the right bin. One of the historical challenges around people's behaviour has been getting people to put stuff in the right bin, making sure they know what bin is the right bin, and making sure those bins are available to them. So it is about culture change. It is always about people, and it is always about getting them to think in the right way.
So Nick, I guess just to add to that, and the second, the other question, there's an anonymous question on there as well about what strategies, what are the main challenges for implementing circular economy. For me, I agree with that. It is about the operational side of things. It's about empowering people. So there's still, I still come across organisations where somebody has an asset and they're saying, I want you to put that in that skip. And I'm saying, well, I want to take that and not put that in that skip. I want to put it out to a charity, or I want to sell it on your behalf and recover value, or, you know, some other method of keeping that asset in use. And you'd be amazed how many times I get the response, I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can sell it. I don't know if I can donate it. We don't have the processes. That's not what the contract says. You know, these are the people are afraid to make decisions, and it's not just about waste. I think we see that in a lot of organisations. Some organisations I've came across that really do really well in empowering people to make out-the-box decisions and put them forward. So it's about empowering people to think differently, but it's also to incentivise them to do that and also have a measure of that. Because my experience of people doing a building change, for example, is that they're incentivised and they're measured by how quickly you can get us into the new building, how quickly and efficiently can you get the new furniture installed, how seamlessly can you move the people from that building into there. And waste's always an afterthought. It's never measured, and people don't feel empowered to do something differently. They think the sustainability team is going to handle the climate emergency, and really it's everybody's responsibility.
I think that's a really, really good answer, Kev. And I would just reiterate something you said at the end there as an answer to the question around what are the challenges here. And the biggest challenge is that historical one you've just mentioned, which is waste is always an afterthought. When businesses move the importance of waste and doing the right thing with waste up their agenda and empower their people to make creative, sensible decisions, then things improve.